Caligula's final night. The secret plot. Rome, January 24th, 41 AD. The Palatine Hill glittered beneath torchlight. Music and laughter poured from the marble corridors of the imperial palace, where Emperor Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, known to history as Caligula, hosted what he called the Feast of the Gods. But tonight, Rome was not celebrating its gods. It was watching one die. The hall was drenched in gold. Tables sagged under roasted peacocks, honeyed dormice, and wine from Alexandria, each cup overflowing. Caligula stood before his court, a crown of ivy twisted around his head, wearing a purple cloak once reserved for Jupiter himself. His voice thundered, slurring with arrogance and wine. "Behold your god," he shouted, raising his cup. "Rome bows before me, as Olympus bows before the sky." Laughter filled the room, forced, hollow, fearful. Senators clapped with trembling hands. Even the Praetorian guards, who stood like statues at the edges of the room, dared not meet his eyes. Only one man did. His name was Cassius Chaerea, a commander of the Praetorian Guard, and the man whose silence hid a deadly secret. For months, whispers had spread through the marble corridors. Rome's people had grown restless, its nobles terrified. Caligula, once adored as the young god emperor, had become something monstrous. He had executed senators on a whim, accused his sisters of treason, and declared war on the sea itself, ordering his soldiers to attack the waves and collect seashells as spoils. One senator, when asked by Caligula if he thought he was divine, hesitated for a heartbeat too long. His entire family vanished by dawn. But Chaerea's hatred was personal. The emperor mocked him publicly, calling him a coward, a woman, even giving him obscene passwords for the guard each morning, phrases meant to humiliate. Venu esquisse, the priestess's secret. Every insult cut deeper than a blade. And now, that blade was almost ready. As the feast roared on, Caligula danced upon a table, spilling wine, mocking Rome's senators one by one. He pointed to Marcus Vinicius, a nobleman known for his loyalty. "You still think Rome belongs to the people?" Caligula sneered. "Rome belongs to me. I am a law. I am the god. You breathe because I will it." The crowd laughed, but the tension was suffocating. Behind a mask of cheer, eyes darted nervously. A single misstep tonight could mean death. Chaerea watched from the shadows. He had already spoken to two men, Cornelius Sabinus and Gnaeus Sentius, both officers disillusioned by Caligula's madness. Together, they had sworn an oath. Before dawn, the emperor would die. But killing a god required more than courage. It required timing. Outside the palace, the city slept uneasily. The streets of Rome, once filled with merchants and soldiers, were dark and still. A storm brewed in the west, thunder echoing like distant drums. In the barracks near the Palatine Gate, a group of Praetorians sharpened their blades. The air was thick with sweat and silence. No one spoke the emperor's name. One of them muttered, "What if the gods punish us?" Another replied coldly, "If he is a god, let him save himself." Meanwhile, in the palace gardens, Caligula wandered barefoot under the moonlight, speaking to the statues of the gods. He whispered secrets only he could hear. "I have seen what others cannot," he murmured. "The empire is mine to shape. Even the stars bend to me." To his court, he seemed insane. To himself, he was ascending. That night, as dawn neared, Chaerea approached the temple corridor where the emperor would pass after the morning games. The Ludi Palatini, a festival of gladiators and acrobats, was set to begin. Caligula had demanded to see it up close, away from the crowds, surrounded only by his most trusted men. Chaerea knew this was his moment. As he knelt in prayer, the echoes of the feast still rang in his mind. The drunken laughter, the flicker of torches, the emperor's voice booming like thunder. "The gods fear me. Even death bows to Caesar." But tonight, death would not bow. Chaerea whispered to himself, "Not anymore." The plan was in motion. And as the first rays of light touched Rome's marble domes, the man who called himself a god walked unknowingly toward his fate. The morning of January 24th, 41 AD dawned gray and cold over Rome. The echo of last night's laughter had vanished into an uneasy silence. The Palatine Palace, once alive with musicians and dancers, now felt haunted, its marble floors glimmering beneath the weak light of dawn. Inside, servants rushed to clear the remnants of the feast. Broken goblets, spilled wine, and crushed fruit smeared across the floor like bloodstains. The air smelled of perfume, smoke, and fear. At the center of it all, Caligula sat slouched upon a golden couch, head resting on his palm. He looked tired, but not humbled. His eyes wandered toward a bronze mirror on the wall. "Do you see it too?" he whispered to his reflection. "The eyes that watch me, the gods that envy me." To his attendants, these mutterings had become routine. No one dared to answer. Then a guard stepped forward and bowed deeply. "Divine Emperor," he said, "the actors are ready. The festival begins soon." Caligula's lips curled into a smile. "Let Rome see her god rejoice." He rose from his seat and gestured for his entourage to follow. Among them, his wife Caesonia, his infant daughter Julia Drusilla, and several Praetorian guards led by none other than Cassius Chaerea. As they moved through the palace corridor, Caligula hummed a tune, a melody once sung in his youth, before power had devoured him. It was strange, almost tender. No one realized they were hearing the last song of an emperor. The corridor leading to the underground theater was dimly lit by torches. Shadows crawled along the walls. Every footstep echoed louder than the last. Chaerea walked behind the emperor, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. His pulse pounded in his ears. He could hear the whisper of his own breath. He had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in his mind. But now, with Caligula just a few paces ahead, the weight of it struck him. He wasn't just about to kill a man. He was about to kill a symbol, a god in the eyes of Rome. But then he remembered the faces. The senator who'd been flayed alive. The soldiers executed for a joke. The temples defiled in Caligula's madness. The fear, the shame, the blood. That memory hardened his resolve. Caligula turned suddenly, his eyes gleaming with amusement. "Chaerea," he said mockingly, "have you chosen today's password?" Chaerea's throat tightened. The emperor grinned. "Perhaps." Priapus's delight. He laughed cruelly, and the others joined, fearful to remain silent. But this time, Chaerea didn't bow. He looked the emperor in the eyes and replied coldly, "No, Caesar. The word is justice." The laughter died instantly. Caligula frowned. "What did you say?" And before he could speak again, Chaerea's sword flashed from its scabbard. The blade plunged deep into the emperor's neck. Caligula's eyes went wide, shocked, not in pain, but in disbelief, as if reality itself had betrayed him. Then came a second blow, and another. Cornelius Sabinus struck from the side, slicing through his ribs. Sentius followed, stabbing into his chest. The emperor staggered backward, gasping, clutching the wound as blood poured from his lips. "You dare," he croaked. "You dare kill a god?" But no one answered. The sound of steel drowned his words. The emperor fell to his knees, blood spreading across the marble like a crimson flower. His golden cloak lay torn, his crown rolling across the floor. And for the first time in years, silence returned to Rome. Caligula's wife, Caesonia, rushed forward, screaming. She threw herself over his body, begging for mercy. "Please, he's your emperor," she cried. But the guards were beyond mercy. One of them struck her down with a single blow. Others turned their eyes away. Her daughter, little Julia Drusilla, no older than 1 year, was taken by the guards. Some accounts say she was killed moments later to erase the bloodline. Others whisper she was hidden away, spirited out of Rome by a loyal servant. No one knows the truth. Meanwhile, outside the palace, chaos erupted. The conspirators ran through the corridors, shouting, "The tyrant is dead. Caligula is dead." Panic spread. Some slaves cheered. Others hid, fearing retribution. Senators locked their doors, unsure which faction would rise next. But among the Praetorians, confusion reigned. Half the guards were loyal to Chaerea. The other half demanded vengeance. One of them shouted, he was still Caesar. You've doomed us all. And in that moment, Rome balanced on a knife's edge between freedom and civil war. In a secret chamber nearby, Claudius, Caligula's uncle, trembled behind a curtain. The soldiers stormed past him, blades drawn. For hours he remained hidden, until a group of Praetorians discovered him trembling in the shadows. They raised their swords, then hesitated. Claudius was weak, harmless, and easily controlled. To them, he was the perfect puppet. And so, before the day ended, they carried him out to the Praetorian camp and hailed him as the new emperor. The blood of one god had birthed another. As for Chaerea, he stood over Caligula's corpse, staring down at what he had done. The man who had mocked him, humiliated him, and terrorized Rome, now just a heap of flesh and broken dreams. He whispered, "Justice has been served." But deep down, even he knew, Rome was far from healed. For in the shadows, a new game of power had begun, and the gods of vengeance were not finished. When dawn broke over Rome the next day, the empire itself felt disoriented, as if waking from a fever dream. The body of Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, known to history as Caligula, lay sprawled in the corner of a marble corridor, half covered by a purple cloak soaked in his own blood. The palace servants had fled. The laughter, the music, the madness, all gone. Only silence remained. But silence in Rome was never peace. It was the pause before another storm. Cassius Chaerea stood at the center of that storm. The man who had slain a self-proclaimed god was now being hailed as both hero and traitor. To some senators, he was the savior of the Republic. To the Praetorian Guard, he was a murderer who had broken their sacred oath. In the dim halls of the Senate House, arguments erupted like thunder. "Rome is free again," shouted one senator. "Let us restore the Republic." "Free," another sneered. "Free to be conquered by chaos? We need order." Outside, the city boiled. Citizens whispered in markets and taverns, asking the same question: who now ruled Rome? For centuries, Rome had feared only its enemies, but now it feared itself. Meanwhile, Caligula's body lay abandoned in the palace for hours, until a handful of loyal slaves dared to return. They wrapped his corpse in an old linen sheet and carried it secretly through back alleys to the Lamian Gardens, where they buried him in a shallow grave under the moonlight. There was no ceremony, no prayers. The man who had once demanded to be worshipped as a god was now lowered into the earth like a thief. They say that for nights afterward, strange lights flickered near his grave. Some claimed to hear laughter echoing from the shadows. Others whispered that the emperor's ghost, mad, furious, and unrepentant, walked the gardens, demanding his crown back from the living. But Rome had no time for ghosts. In the barracks, the Praetorian Guard argued over their next move. The empire could not remain leaderless. And then came the moment that would shape centuries of history, the discovery of Claudius. Hidden behind a curtain in the palace, trembling in terror, Claudius had expected to be killed. Instead, the guards dragged him before the camp and raised him high, shouting, "Ave Caesar!" At first, the Senate resisted. Claudius was seen as weak, a stammering scholar unfit to rule. But the soldiers' loyalty was clear. The man who controlled the army controlled Rome. By nightfall, Claudius was emperor. And with that, the Republic's last dream died once more. In the days that followed, Cassius Chaerea and his fellow conspirators were hunted down. Claudius, despite being raised to power by the same coup, knew Rome's balance depended on vengeance. When Chaerea was captured, he was brought before the new emperor. Claudius looked at him for a long moment and said, quietly, "You killed a god to make me emperor. What should I do with you?" Chaerea smiled faintly. "Do what emperors do," he said. And Claudius nodded. Chaerea was executed by his own soldiers, his head severed cleanly by the sword. In his final moments, he stood tall, refusing to kneel. "Rome," he whispered, "remember why we struck." But Rome never remembers. It only survives. With Chaerea's death, the last spark of rebellion died too. Claudius, though more rational than his predecessor, quickly learned the truth every emperor would face. To rule Rome was to balance between fear and worship. He restored some of Caligula's victims, rebuilt temples, and promised peace, but the ghost of Caligula lingered in every shadow of the palace. Some say Claudius once confessed, "At night, I hear his laughter behind the walls." Others whispered that Caligula's spirit cursed every emperor who came after. Those who wore the purple robe would either drown in power or die by betrayal. And history, strangely, proved that curse true. Years later, Caligula's remains were secretly exhumed by his sisters and placed in the mausoleum of Augustus, among the honored dead. It was Rome's way of pretending order had returned, of burying madness beneath marble. But the truth was far darker. Caligula was not an accident. He was the reflection of Rome itself. Its hunger for power, its obsession with gods, its madness disguised as divinity. He had only mirrored what the city already was. In the heart of Rome, beneath the marble and the glory, one could still find the old bloodstains on the palace floor, the marks no one dared clean, for they reminded all who walked there that even gods could die. The whispers continued through the years, that Caligula's death had been foretold by an oracle, that his own guards had plotted against him for months, that even his food had been cursed by priests who'd grown tired of his blasphemy. But none of it mattered, because in the end, the divine Caesar was just another man whose reach had exceeded the human limit. And on that cold Roman night, power itself had turned on its master. In the dim light of history, Caligula remains a contradiction. To some, he was a monster, a man who lost himself in delusion. To others, he was a tragic figure, consumed by the empire's limitless ambition. But one truth endures: Rome doesn't destroy monsters. It creates them. And as long as men crave worship, another Caligula will always rise.